Edinburgh, a city built on 7 hills, where ancient stones hold centuries of secrets. From its medieval closes to its towering castle, every corner whispers tales of the supernatural. They say Edinburgh is one of the most haunted cities in the world. Our first location takes us to the heart of the Old Town, to the Royal Mile itself, for one of Edinburgh's most terrifying locations. Today, we're venturing beneath the bustling Royal Mile to uncover one of Scotland's most haunting secrets, a 16th century street frozen in time where the dead refuse to rest. This is the real Mary King's Close, a place where plague, death, and terror have left an indelible mark on the very stones themselves. This is the story of Edinburgh's most haunted underground street. Mary King's Close was once a thriving medieval street, built in the 16th century on the steep slopes below Edinburgh Castle. Named after Mary King, a prominent merchant's widow, this narrow close was home to hundreds of families, from wealthy merchants in the upper floors to the desperately poor crammed into the cellars below. Then in 1645, disaster struck. The bubonic plague arrived in Edinburgh with devastating force. Mary King's, with its overcrowded conditions and poor sanitation, became a death trap. Bodies piled up faster than they could be removed. The stench of death filled these narrow passages. What happened next has been debated by historians for centuries. According to legend, the authorities made a horrific decision. Rather than risk the plague spreading further, they sealed off the entire area with families still inside, leaving men, women, and children to die slow, agonizing deaths in the darkness. While some historians dispute this mass entombment, what's undeniable is that hundreds died here in agony. In 1753, the Royal Exchange was built directly over the area, burying this street of sorrows beneath tons of stone and mortar. For over 250 years, Mary King's Close remained a tomb until it was reopened in the 1990s. But death, it seems, was not the end for many residents of Mary King's Close. Since its rediscovery, this underground street has become one of Edinburgh's most actively haunted locations. The most famous spirit is that of a young girl known simply as Annie. A Japanese psychic visiting in the 1990s claimed to encounter the spirit of a child, a girl around 10 years old who had died of plague, alone and abandoned. The psychic reported that Annie was crying because she had lost her doll. Since then, visitors have left hundreds of toys, dolls, and gifts for Annie. Many report feeling tiny fingers tugging at their clothes, the sensation of a small hand slipping into theirs, or hearing the sound of a child crying in the darkness. Some have even captured unexplained childlike voices on audio recordings. But Annie is far from alone. Throughout the area, visitors and staff report seeing figures moving in and out of passages, always just at the edge of their vision. Many visitors to Mary King's Close have spoken of encountering a mysterious woman in black, a shadowy female figure dressed in dark, old-fashioned clothing, who drifts silently through the warren of abandoned rooms and passageways. Some believe this apparition may in fact be Mary King herself, forever tied to the narrow streets that once echoed with life. Perhaps most disturbing are the reports from the plague doctor's room. Visitors describe seeing the ghostly figure of a man in the traditional plague doctor's mask and long black coat, still making his rounds centuries after death claimed his final patient. In 2019, a security guard reported seeing a full apparition of a woman in medieval dress walking through the close at 3 a.m. The CCTV footage showed nothing. tour guides regularly experience unexplained phenomena, doors slamming shut, and the sound of footsteps following them through empty passages. One guide reported that during a tour, a visitor asked about a little girl who seemed to be following the group, but there were no children on that particular tour. Even more chilling, visitors have reported conversations with spirits. In 2021, a paranormal investigator claimed to have a lengthy exchange with the spirit of a plague victim who described the horror of being sealed alive inside Mary King's, begging for food and water that never came. Electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs, are frequently captured here, and electromagnetic field detectors go haywire in certain areas, particularly near Annie's room and the old bakery. These areas seem to be highly active through the day or the night. The real Mary King's Close is a place where tragedy, suffering, and death have seemingly imprinted themselves into the very fabric of reality. From the dark, claustrophobic streets of Mary King's Close, we now travel just a short walk across Edinburgh's Old Town to the bustling grass market. Here, where livestock traders once gathered and crowds watched public executions, stands one of the city's most notorious haunted locations. One of Edinburgh's oldest and most haunted pubs, a place where history and the paranormal collide. This is the White Hart Inn, and since 2005, it's held the chilling title of Edinburgh's most haunted pub. The White Hart Inn sits in Edinburgh's historic grass market, and its story begins way back in 1516. That's over 500 years of continuous operation, making it one of the oldest pubs in all of Edinburgh. While the building you see today was reconstructed in 1740, the original cellar, the cellarage as it was known, still remains from that first year. The name itself comes from an even older legend. In 1128, King David I was hunting in the forest that once stood where Edinburgh now stands. He was attacked by a white stag, a white hart, and nearly killed. The king survived, and the area has been associated with that fateful encounter ever since. In 1660, the area just outside the White Hart Inn became Edinburgh's official execution site. The upper floors of the White Hart were rented out to spectators who wanted a prime view of the hangings below. They'd sit, eating and drinking, watching people meet their end on the gallows. Some of Edinburgh's most infamous executions took place right outside the pub's windows. Among them was Maggie Dixon, known as Half-Hangit Maggie, who was sentenced to hang in 1724 for concealing her pregnancy. She actually survived her hanging and lived for several more decades. No discussion of Edinburgh's dark history would be complete without mentioning Burke and Hare, the city's most notorious serial killers. Between 1828 and their capture, these two Irish immigrants murdered at least 16 people, selling the bodies to anatomists. The White Hart Inn is frequently connected to their story. Legend says they would lure victims here, ply them with drink, and then take them back to their lodging house in nearby Tanner's Close to murder them. However, the historical evidence for this is actually quite murky. What we do know is that the pub was in their neighborhood, and given its reputation as a popular drinking establishment, it's entirely possible they frequented it. The modern-day White Hart has its share of reports of full-body apparitions from visitors and staff alike, the first of which is Sally Beggs, a woman they believe died in 1772. Witnesses describe her as approximately 5'4" or 5 inches tall, with long light brown or blonde hair. She was said to be outgoing and popular in the Grassmarket area. According to history, she was found lying dead in the street. Her spirit reportedly manifests in the main bar area. She is said to wander aimlessly, as if not acknowledging where she is or where she is going. The second entity is a man named Jack, who appears in the cellar's keg room. He's described as broad-statured, aged 45 to 50, wearing a cloak over his shoulder. He's reportedly disfigured, with his face marred by scarring or some kind of skin condition. Witnesses describe him as not very pleasant-looking, and his presence in the cellar is particularly unsettling. There's also a third male presence that has been seen standing at the top of the stairs, wearing a tricorn hat, though nothing is known of who this person was in life. He has been seen by several of the staff and guests frequenting the pub. Along with full-body apparitions, staff at the pub have witnessed beer taps turning themselves off, plates flying off shelves with no explanation, and having their hair pulled by invisible hands. There are also reports of a woman in a red dress who wanders through the pub, and others have seen a child in medieval clothing haunting both the bar and cellar areas. The White Hart Inn may welcome visitors with warmth and ale, but its past is anything but inviting. From the dark dealings of Burke and Hare to chilling reports of full-bodied apparitions, this old pub carries a history buried in shadows. Step inside, and you may just find the echoes of Edinburgh's darkest secrets still linger. Now let's leave the White Hart Inn in Edinburgh's Grassmarket and travel just a short walk up the hill to the old town, to one of the most haunted locations in all of Scotland. Beneath the bustling streets lies a place where history's darkest chapters were written in stone: the Edinburgh Vaults. In 1788, Edinburgh completed an ambitious project, the South Bridge, spanning 19 massive stone arches across the Cowgate Ravine. But this wasn't just a bridge. Beneath the road level, builders created a series of vaulted chambers within each arch. Originally, these underground spaces housed legitimate businesses, taverns, cobblers' workshops, and storage rooms for merchants. But there was a fatal flaw. The vaults were poorly built, and within years, water began seeping through the stone. The damp, the darkness, the cold, it drove respectable businesses away. As the Industrial Revolution transformed Britain, the Cowgate area became Edinburgh's most notorious slum. The abandoned vaults attracted those society had forgotten: the homeless, the desperate, the criminal. What had once been shops and storage became a hidden city of poverty and vice. Down here, illegal whiskey distilleries operated in the shadows. Prostitution thrived in the darkness. The vaults became a refuge for the poorest of Edinburgh's poor. Families crammed into cold, damp chambers with no sanitation, no light, no hope. For decades, unimaginable suffering occurred in these dark chambers. Disease was rampant, violence was commonplace, death was a frequent visitor. And around 1860, the vaults were mysteriously sealed and abandoned, buried beneath rubble and forgotten for over a century. The vaults remained sealed until the 1980s excavations reopened them. Almost immediately, the paranormal reports began. The most famous resident is a tall man in shabby clothes, now known as Mr. Boots. Visitors hear his heavy footsteps approaching from behind in empty corridors. People smell foul breath when no one is there. He allegedly lurks in the back sections, watching visitors, and has been known to push or grab people violently. One of the most terrifying entities in the vaults is a wailing banshee. Visitors report hearing blood-curdling screams and wails echoing through the stone chambers, the death cry of this Irish spirit. The sound is so disturbing that some people refuse to continue their tour. According to legend, hearing a banshee's wail is an omen of death, and in these vaults filled with centuries of suffering, Her screams have never stopped. In other parts of the vaults, the ghost of a young boy has been reported frequently. He's said to be searching for a new parental figure. Visitors feel tugs on their clothing or hair. Some report a cold hand grasping their own, the ghost hand of a child who died alone in the darkness. In the cobbler's room, especially in the northwest corner, female visitors experience overwhelming grief and anger. Some suffer sudden abdominal pains with no medical explanation. This has been linked to the ghost of a young woman dressed entirely in black. The emotions are so powerful that people have collapsed. Poltergeist activity has also been reported. Stones are thrown across rooms by invisible hands. People are pushed and shoved by forces they cannot see. Visitors report scratches appearing on their skin, unexplained bruises forming before their eyes. One of the most terrifying areas is a chamber containing a Wiccan stone circle. According to local legend, Wiccans built this circle to trap an extremely negative, violent entity. Anyone who steps inside the circle is said to be attacked or suffer extreme bad luck. There are reports of a man having a heart attack while standing in the circle. Tour guides warn visitors not to enter, but some ignore the warnings and immediately regret it. One more full-body apparition that has had many reported sightings is that of a cobbler, presumably the spirit of a man who once ran his business from the vaults. He has been seen sitting in one of the chambers. Though he reportedly never seems to acknowledge visitors or tour groups, it is said that he appears to be lost in his own thoughts. From the spirit known as Mr. Boots to the spirit of a child looking for a parent, from the shrieking of a banshee to ghostly cobblers and poltergeist activity, the Edinburgh Vaults remain one of the most haunted and unsettling places in Scotland. And perhaps, even now, something down there is still waiting to be found. Now we leave the Edinburgh Vaults behind and head back up to street level. From the darkness beneath the South Bridge, we walk down the Royal Mile toward where Canongate begins. Our final destination is a graveyard that most visitors completely overlook. Canongate Kirkyard, our last stop on this journey through Edinburgh's darkest locations. Canongate Kirkyard was established in the late 1600s, when Canongate was still its own independent borough, separate from Edinburgh. This wasn't a pauper's graveyard. This was where Scotland buried its most influential minds. Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, is buried here. So is Robert Ferguson, the poet who inspired Robert Burns. But prestigious burials aren't what make this place notorious. It's the murders, the unmarked graves, and the bodies that were never meant to rest in peace. The most famous grave belongs to David Rizzio, an Italian courtier who served as private secretary to Mary, Queen of Scots. On the night of March 9th, 1566, Rizzio was dining with the Queen in her private chambers at Holyrood Palace. Mary's husband, Lord Darnley, along with a group of conspirators, burst through the door. Rizzio knew what was coming. They murdered Rizzio in the corridor, 57 stab wounds. His blood reportedly still stains the floorboards of Holyrood Palace over 450 years later. His body was first buried at Holyrood Abbey, though some historians claim Mary later had him moved to the royal tomb. But there's a persistent legend that connects Rizzio to Canongate Kirkyard, a tradition that says his remains eventually found their way there. Whether that's true or not, the mystery only adds to the graveyard's dark reputation. In 16th century Scotland, people believed that if someone wasn't buried properly, in the right position, With the correct ceremonies, their soul would be condemned to wander the earth, unable to find peace. Rizzio was brutally murdered, hastily buried, and possibly even moved to another location afterward. Everything about his burial violated the traditions meant to give the dead their rest. And according to reports from Canongate Kirkyard, David Rizzio himself refuses to rest. Having been reported multiple times by visitors, Rizzio has been allegedly seen in amongst the gravestones on several occasions over a period of decades. The most frequently reported apparition is a woman dressed entirely in black. Witnesses describe her standing among the gravestones, weeping uncontrollably. People have reported approaching her in order to help or give comfort, but the woman simply vanishes whenever anyone gets too close. Tour guides who regularly visit the kirkyard have reported encountering her dozens of times. Same appearance, same heartbroken crying, same sudden disappearance. No one knows who she is or why she's mourning, but she's been seen so consistently that she's become part of Canongate's reputation. But there's something far more sinister connected to this location. In 1707, when the Act of Union was signed, the moment Scotland and England officially became Great Britain, chaos erupted across Edinburgh. Some celebrated, others rioted. At Queensberry House, right beside Canongate Kirkyard, lived the Duke of Queensberry, one of the key architects of the Union. What the public didn't know was that the Duke had kept a dark secret locked away. His eldest son, James Douglas, Earl of Drumlanrig, had been violently insane from childhood. The boy was kept under lock and key in the house, hidden from society. On that day of historic chaos in 1707, amid the riots and celebrations, someone forgot to secure the 10-year-old's locked room. Or perhaps in the confusion, he simply got out. When the household returned, they found a nightmare in the kitchen. A servant had been slaughtered. The boy had roasted the servant on a spit and begun to eat him before being discovered. James Douglas passed away at the young age of 17. The oven he used still exists in the basement of Queensberry House, now part of the Scottish Parliament building. Witnesses have reported seeing what they believe to be the spirit of James Douglas moving unnaturally between the graves after dark. Others have heard screaming emanating from the cemetery when absolutely no one is present. Many visitors have also reported the overwhelming stench of burning flesh near Queensberry House and the kirkyard's southern wall, with no possible source. Ghost hunters who have investigated the kirkyard overnight have reported hearing and recording the sounds of shovels digging up earth at precisely 3:16 a.m. This has been attributed by some people to body snatchers of the time, robbing graves and selling bodies to surgeons. Canongate Kirkyard sits quietly at the bottom of the Royal Mile, holding centuries of Edinburgh's darkest secrets within its walls. David Rizzio, brutally murdered and possibly never laid to rest. The woman in black, eternally weeping for reasons no one will ever know. James Douglas, the disturbed child whose horrific act and spirit some say still haunts the grounds near Queensberry House. And countless victims of the body snatchers, their eternal rest violated, their bodies stolen from the earth. The question isn't whether Canongate Kirkyard is haunted. The reports and experiences speak for themselves. The real question is, whose ghost will you encounter if you walk through those gates after dark? From the ghost of Annie to the disturbing deeds committed by Burke and Hare, from wailing banshees to the ghost of Mr. Boots, Edinburgh is rich with dark history and the paranormal. Thank you for watching. If you would like to support the channel, you can do so using the super thanks in the comment section, or simply like, subscribe, comment, and share. See you next time.